Have you ever lived next to a cemetery? Well, I have. And what happened to me on Christmas night will leave you terrified. It was supposed to be a peaceful evening. The house was lit up with twinkling lights, and the Christmas tree glowed warmly in the living room. It was my first Christmas alone, but the sound of the TV and the smell of hot chocolate kept me company. Looking out the window, the cemetery next door seemed darker than usual, shrouded in a fog that hadn't been in the weather forecast. I'd always thought living next to a cemetery would be creepy, but nothing strange had ever happened. Until that night, just before midnight, I heard a noise outside. A muffled sound, like something heavy being dragged across wet grass. My heart began to race. I thought it might be an animal, maybe a stray dog. I grabbed my flashlight and decided to check it out. The front door felt oddly heavy, as if something were holding it shut. When I finally opened it, a blast of cold air hit me. Not just the chill of the night, but something unnatural. I crossed the small yard that separated my house from the cemetery. The flashlight shook in my hand, illuminating gravestones and twisted trees. The noise continued, now closer, clearer. It wasn't just dragging, it was mixed with slow, deliberate footsteps and the scrape of metal against the ground. "Is anyone there?" I called out, trying to steady my voice. Only silence answered me. I decided to go back to the house, but as I turned, I heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Don't go." I froze. The sound had come from behind me, from among the gravestones. I swung the flashlight back, scanning the area. At first, I saw nothing. Then I saw it. A figure, pale and shrouded in mist, was slowly emerging from the shadows. Its eyes were too dark for it, and its arms stretched toward me. I didn't think twice. I ran back to the house, slamming the door shut behind me. But the nightmare was just beginning. The Christmas lights began to flicker erratically. The warm scent of hot chocolate was replaced by a foul stench like rotting flesh. The TV turned off on its own. In the silence that followed, I heard it again. That same whisper, now inside my house. "You shouldn't have come." I turned to the window, and there it was. The pale figure standing in my yard. But then I noticed something that froze my blood. It wasn't outside anymore. Its reflection was inside my living room. Everything went dark. When I woke up, it was Christmas morning. The stench was gone, and the house seemed normal. Except for one thing. On the floor, near the door, were muddy footprints, long strides starting at the cemetery and ending in my bedroom. I moved out the next day, but every Christmas Eve I still wake up to the sound of footsteps and a whisper in my ear. "Don't go." It was nearly midnight, and I was home alone, finishing some emails on my laptop. The rain softly tapped against the window, and the silence was comforting. Until I heard 3 knocks on the front door. I found it strange since no one ever visited me so late. I waited a moment, thinking it might be the wind, but the knocks came again, louder, more insistent. I got up slowly, my heart already racing. I peeked through the peephole, but I didn't see anyone. The hallway was empty. I thought about ignoring it, but something told me I needed to check. When I opened the door, there was nothing but the falling rain. That's when I noticed something on the ground. A small envelope, already soaked. I picked it up and with trembling hands opened it. Inside was a piece of paper with a single sentence. "You let me in." My blood ran cold. Before I could react, I felt a freezing gust of wind pass through me and heard footsteps coming from inside the house. I ran to my bedroom, locking the door, trying to understand what was happening. My phone wasn't working. and the light started flickering. Then, from the other side of the door, I heard a low, dragged laugh. I'm here now. And you? What would you do in this situation? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more scary stories. What would you do if you woke up in the middle of the night to grab a glass of water and started seeing shadowy figures? That's what happened to me. What started as a harmless scare turned into something far more sinister. It was a quiet, hot night. The silence in the house was so profound that I could hear every little sound. The ticking of the clock, the faint creak of the walls. I woke up thirsty and headed to the kitchen. The light from the fridge cast strange, long shadows across the floor. And that's when I saw it. In the corner of the living room, something moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the figure was there, standing still, watching me. My breath caught in my chest and my heart began to race. I blinked, and it was gone. I rushed back to my bedroom, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. Gripping my phone, I decided to do something reckless. Film the hallway. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. At first, the camera captured nothing, just darkness and silence. But when I replayed the video, my blood turned cold. There was something there, a shadowy figure, translucent, moving slowly toward the camera. When it stopped, I could see it more clearly. It had no face, just an empty void, but its eyes, two glowing points of light, stared directly at me. The next morning, I showed the video to my cousin. He laughed at first, brushing it off as a trick of the light or a symptom of my sleepiness. But as he watched, his smile faded. "This isn't normal," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Something's wrong with your house." Determined to reassure me, or maybe himself, he decided to stay the night. He wanted to see if anything strange happened again. At midnight, he wandered into the living room, saying he would face whatever it was. I stayed in my room, listening to his footsteps disappear down the hallway. Minutes later, I heard the front door slam. I ran to check, but he was already gone, and he never came back. The next day, I called, texted, and even went to his house. No response. Days turned into weeks, and nobody knew where he was. The police got involved, but found no leads. What haunts me the most is what they found in his empty room, a crumpled piece of paper with a hastily scrawled message. "They're watching me." To this day, I wonder if I opened the door for something, or if it was already waiting for us. Do you believe mirrors can hold more than just your reflection? I didn't, until that night. It was an ordinary, quiet evening. The house was dark, save for a dim lamp in the hallway. I had a habit of walking through the house at night when I couldn't sleep. That's when I stopped in front of the mirror in the corridor. It was an old mirror, framed with ornate wooden carvings passed down from my grandmother. She always told me something strange. Never stare at a mirror for too long at night. I chuckled at the thought. Family superstitions, I told myself. But that night, something felt off. The reflection in the mirror was darker than the hallway itself. The air grew heavy, sending a chill down my spine. For some reason, I couldn't look away. And then I saw it. At first, it was just a shadow in the corner of the mirror. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light. But it didn't go away. The shadow began to move, growing larger, taking shape. Two hollow eyes appeared, black as voids, staring back at me. My heart pounded as I turned to check behind me, but the hallway was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was closer, and it was smiling. I stumbled backward, my breath shallow, my body frozen. This wasn't my imagination. It was real. The shadow in the mirror raised a hand, and cracks began to spread across the glass, radiating from its fingers. I ran. I locked myself in my bedroom, thinking the door would keep me safe. But the mirror outside seemed alive. I could hear it creaking, groaning, as if something were trying to push through. Then the sound changed. Soft at first, like a faint scratch, growing louder until it was unmistakable. A voice. "Let me in." I froze. My eyes darted to the small mirror on the wall of my bedroom. The reflection began to darken. There it was again. The shadow, grinning widely, its hands pressed against the inside of the glass. The last thing I remember was the mirror shattering and the whispering voice echoing in my head. "Now we're together." The next morning I found all the mirrors in the house shattered. But the terror wasn't over. Every time I pass by a reflective surface, windows, puddles, even the glint of a phone screen, I feel it watching me, waiting. And you? What would you do in this situation? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this story and subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales like these. I shouldn't be here. It was late, and the old cemetery on the hill had a sense of abandonment that made my chest tighten. But ever since I was a kid, I had heard stories about this place, how, at midnight, the dead would whisper secrets to anyone brave enough to listen. Tonight, something pulled me here. A morbid curiosity I couldn't ignore. The light rain followed me from the rusty gates. Each step sank into the muddy ground, the sound muffled and eerie. Around me, ancient tombstones stood like silent sentinels, some leaning, others cracked, their names obscured by moss. The trees swayed in the cold wind, their branches stretching out like old hands reaching for the sky. I should have been scared, but something inside me drove me forward. In the heart of the cemetery stood a mausoleum, imposing, dark, with its door slightly ajar. My chest tightened, my breathing quickened. I knew I shouldn't go inside, but my feet moved on their own. The air inside was suffocating, heavy. The flashlight in my hand shook, casting flickering light across the walls. They were adorned with carved faces, worn by time, but they seemed to watch me. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, barely distinguishable from the wind, but it was a voice, low, raspy, and unmistakably calling my name. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. No answer, only silence. The voice came again, louder this time. It was a mix of a moan and a sinister chuckle, echoing against the cold stone walls. I stumbled back, out of the mausoleum. The cemetery felt different now. The air was colder, and the fog had thickened, making everything around me feel distant and surreal. That's when I saw it. Among the tombstones stood a figure, pale, tall. Its eyes were hollow, and its smile stretched unnaturally wide. It didn't move, but I felt its presence like a weight pressing on my chest. It was watching me, holding me. The flashlight slipped from my hand, hitting the ground with a dull thud. My legs shook so badly I could barely stand. Then the voice came again, clearer this time, as if it were right beside me. "You wanted to hear the dead. Now there's no going back." I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I recall is the sun rising, the rusty gates behind me, and the overwhelming relief of being away from that place. But when I got home, I noticed something. On my arm, there was a mark. 5 thin lines, like skeletal fingers, burned into my skin. I want to believe it was all a nightmare. But every night in the silence, I still hear it. My name. Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when you were alone? I never believed in these things until I had to spend a night at my parents' house while they were away. The house was old, with a large attic and a small storage room at the end of the hallway. I always hated that room. Since I was a kid, I avoided passing by it at night. The night started off quiet. I put on a movie to relax, but around midnight, I heard a noise. It was faint, like scratching, coming from the storage room. I ignored it. It's just an old house creaking, I thought. But the noises continued, louder this time. Something was moving inside. I grabbed a flashlight and went to check. My heart was racing, but I convinced myself it was just a mouse or something. I opened the door slowly. The small space was empty. I thought about leaving the door open, but the idea of staring into that dark room unsettled me. I closed it and went back to the living room. Later, as I lay in bed, I started hearing another sound. Footsteps. They came from the hallway, light and soft, like someone walking barefoot. My whole body tensed. I knew I was alone in the house. I grabbed my phone and tried calling my parents, but it went straight to voicemail. The footsteps stopped and silence filled the air. Fear told me to stay in my room, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowly opened the door and looked into the hallway. Everything seemed normal until I noticed something. The storage room door was open. My breath grew heavy. I was certain I had closed it. I grabbed the flashlight again and walked toward the room. Pointing the light inside, I felt an unexplainable chill. The room was empty as before, but now the walls had marks, deep scratches as if something had tried to claw its way out. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out. I was plunged into total darkness, hearing only my own breath. Then, I heard it. A low voice, almost a whisper, called my name. You finally came. I ran out, slamming the storage room door shut. But the footsteps started again, louder and faster this time, as if someone was running after me. I locked myself in the bedroom and curled up in the corner, praying for it to end. When morning came, the house was silent. I decided to leave immediately, but before I did, I looked at the storage room one last time. The door was closed again, as if nothing had happened. But something was different. On the inside of the door, a message was scratched into the wood. Come back tonight. I never returned to that house. And you? What would you do in this situation? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more chilling stories like this one.